Michael Thompson stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time that morning. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. After 3 years of being a widower, he had finally found love again with Sarah Martinez, a beautiful woman who had swept him off his feet with her charm and kindness. The small church was decorated with white roses and baby's breath, exactly as Sarah had wanted. His 12-year-old son Danny sat quietly on the bed behind him, watching his father prepare for the ceremony. The boy hadn't said much about the wedding, which worried Michael. Ever since his mother Emma had died in a car accident when Danny was 9, the father and son had formed an unbreakable bond. They had weathered the storm of grief together, learning to cook together, helping each other with homework and work problems, and finding comfort in their shared memories of Emma. "You look nervous, Dad," Danny observed, his voice barely above a whisper. There was something in his tone that made Michael pause. The boy's usually bright eyes seemed distant, almost troubled. Michael turned around and sat beside his son on the bed. "A little nervous, I guess. It's a big day for both of us. Sarah is going to be part of our family now. Are you okay with that, buddy?" Danny nodded slowly, but Michael could sense hesitation. "Dad, do you really know Sarah well enough to marry her? I mean, you've only known her for 8 months. The question caught Michael off guard. It was true that their relationship had moved quickly. Sarah had appeared in their lives like a breath of fresh air during a particularly difficult time. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital and had met Michael when he brought Danny in for a broken arm last winter. Her warmth and apparent love for children had drawn Michael to her immediately. "Sometimes when you know, you just know," Michael replied, using the same words Sarah often said about their relationship. "She makes me happy, Danny, and I thought she made you happy too. Remember how she helped you with your science project? And all those times she cooked your favorite pancakes?" Danny remembered those moments, but there were other memories too. Memories that had been troubling him for weeks. He had noticed things about Sarah that his father seemed to miss. The way she sometimes forgot details about stories she had told them before. How her phone would ring at odd hours, and she would step outside to answer it, speaking in hushed tones. The time he had seen her at the grocery store with another man, holding hands when she was supposed to be at work. But how could he tell his father these things on his wedding day? How could he break his father's heart when he seemed so genuinely happy for the first time since Mom died? "I just want you to be happy, Dad," Danny said finally, forcing a smile. Michael pulled his son into a hug. "I am happy, son. We're going to be a real family again." Downstairs, Sarah was getting ready in the church's bridal room. She looked stunning in her white dress, her dark hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. But as she stared at herself in the mirror, her reflection showed a woman conflicted. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied her lipstick for the second time. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced around to make sure she was alone before reading it. The message was from someone named Carlos. "Are you really going through with this? What about what we discussed?" Sarah quickly deleted the message and put her phone away. She had made her choice. Michael was a good man with a stable job and a beautiful home. He could provide the security she needed. She just had to get through today, and everything would work out. Her maid of honor, Jessica, entered the room carrying a bouquet of white lilies. "You look beautiful, Sarah. Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Jessica had known Sarah for years and could sense her friend's anxiety. "Sarah, is everything okay? You seem distant." "I'm fine. Just wedding nerves," Sarah said quickly, taking the bouquet with hands that were still shaking. Meanwhile, in the church, guests were beginning to arrive. Michael's family filled one side while Sarah's side remained notably sparse. She had explained that most of her family lived far away and couldn't make the trip, but Michael had found it odd that none of her relatives had even called to congratulate them. Danny walked through the church, greeting relatives and family friends. His Aunt Claire, Michael's sister, pulled him aside. "How are you doing with all this, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Claire had never quite warmed up to Sarah, though she had kept her reservations to herself for Michael's sake. "I'm okay," Danny replied, but Claire could see the worry in his eyes. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something is bothering you about Sarah or the wedding, you can tell me." Danny looked around the church, seeing all the decorations, the happy faces of the guests, his father's joy. "Aunt Claire, what if you knew something that could hurt someone you love? Would you tell them even if it meant breaking their heart?" Claire knelt down to Danny's eye level. "That's a very grown-up question, Danny. Sometimes the truth hurts in the short term, but lies hurt much more in the long term. Why? Is there something you need to tell your father?" Before Danny could answer, the wedding coordinator announced that the ceremony would begin in 15 minutes. Danny's moment of potential confession passed as guests began taking their seats. As the organ music began to play, Michael took his position at the altar. His best man, his brother Tom, stood beside him, offering an encouraging smile. The church filled with the soft murmur of excited conversation as everyone prepared to witness the union of Michael and Sarah. Danny was supposed to walk down the aisle as the ring bearer, but as he stood at the back of the church, holding the small pillow with the wedding rings, he felt the weight of the secret he had been carrying. In his pocket was a piece of paper with a phone number and an address he had found in Sarah's purse the week before. He had been curious and had called the number, only to discover something that had shattered his world. The wedding march began to play, and Sarah appeared at the back of the church, radiant in her white dress. The guests rose to their feet, and Michael's face lit up with pure joy as he saw his bride walking toward him. But Danny remained frozen in place, knowing that in a few minutes he would have to make the most difficult decision of his young life. 3 weeks before the wedding, Danny had stumbled upon something that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Sarah had left her purse in the living room while she went to help Michael in the garage with some home repairs. Danny wasn't normally the type to snoop through someone's personal belongings, but Sarah's phone had been buzzing constantly, and she seemed increasingly anxious each time it rang. Curiosity got the better of him. As he approached the purse, the phone buzzed again. Without thinking, he opened the purse to silence the phone, but what he found inside made his heart race. There were 2 phones in the purse. 2 completely different phones. He had never seen the second one before. The phone that was buzzing was the unfamiliar one. Danny picked it up and saw several missed calls from someone named Carlos, and text messages that made his stomach drop. "When are you coming home?" one message read. Another said, "The kids miss their mom. How much longer are you going to keep this up?" Danny's hands shook as he scrolled through more messages. There were photos of Sarah with 2 young children, a boy and a girl who looked to be around 6 and 8 years old. She was hugging them, kissing them, clearly their mother. In other photos, she was with a man who looked nothing like his father. They were at what appeared to be family gatherings, birthday parties, and everyday moments that spoke of a long-established relationship. The most shocking discovery came when Danny found Sarah's real identification cards in a hidden compartment of the purse. Her real name wasn't Sarah Martinez at all. It was Maria Santos, and according to her driver's license, she lived in Phoenix, Arizona. Not locally, as she had told them. She was 34 years old, not 29 as she had claimed to his father. Danny quickly put everything back exactly as he had found it, but the damage was done. The woman his father was planning to marry was living a complete lie. She had a husband, children, and an entire life that she was hiding from them. For days after the discovery, Danny couldn't eat or sleep properly. He watched Sarah interact with his father, cooking dinner, laughing at his jokes, planning their future together, all while knowing she was deceiving them both. The way she would step outside to take phone calls now made perfect sense. She was talking to her real family, the family she had abandoned to pursue whatever scheme she was running. Danny tried to convince himself that maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she was divorced, and those were old photos. Maybe the man in the pictures was her brother, and those were her nieces and nephews. But deep down he knew he was just making excuses because the truth was too horrible to accept. One evening, while Michael was working late at his accounting firm, Danny decided he had to know the truth. He found the phone number for Carlos from Sarah's phone and called it from his own cell phone, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. Hi. Is this Carlos?" Danny asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. Who is this?" "If this is about Maria, I swear if she doesn't come home soon, I'm calling the police. My kids haven't seen their mother in 9 months. Danny's world crumbled. 9 months. Sarah had been with them for 8 months, which meant she had left her real family just 1 month before meeting them. I think I have the wrong number," Danny stammered, and hung up quickly. That night, Danny lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process what he had learned. Sarah was married. She had children. She had abandoned her real family to trick his father into marrying her. But why? What did she want from them? The next day, Danny decided to do more investigating. While Sarah was at what she claimed was her nursing job, Danny rode his bike to the hospital where she supposedly worked. He had been there before when his father picked her up, but this time he went inside and asked to speak with Sarah Martinez. "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name working here," the receptionist told him kindly. "Maybe she goes by a different name? She's a nurse, dark hair, about this tall." Danny described Sarah as best he could. The receptionist checked again but shook her head. "I'm sorry, sweetie. No one matching that description works here either. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" Danny thanked her and rode home in a daze. Sarah didn't work at the hospital at all. Everything she had told them was a lie. But if she didn't work there, where did she go every day? How was she supporting herself? And more importantly, why was she doing this to his father? Over the following weeks, Danny became a reluctant detective. He started paying attention to details he had previously ignored. Sarah never received mail at their house. She claimed her mail went to a P.O. box because she was old-fashioned. She never talked about coworkers because, Danny now realized, she didn't have any. She was always vague about her past, changing small details in her stories each time she told them. The most heartbreaking part for Danny was watching his father's happiness. Michael was genuinely in love with this woman. He talked about their future together, about taking family vacations, about maybe giving Danny a little brother or sister someday. He had even started talking about selling the house and buying a bigger one to accommodate their new family. Danny wanted so badly to tell his father the truth, but every time he tried, the words wouldn't come. How do you tell someone you love that they're being completely deceived? How do you break news that will shatter their world? As the wedding day approached, Sarah seemed to become more and more anxious. She would disappear for hours at a time, claiming she had errands to run. Her phone calls became more frequent and more secretive. Sometimes Danny would catch her crying when she thought no one was looking, but she would quickly wipe away her tears and put on her cheerful facade whenever Michael appeared. 3 days before the wedding, Danny overheard a phone conversation that made everything even worse. Sarah was in the backyard talking on her real phone, the one she kept hidden. "I know, Carlos, I know. Just give me a little more time. Once I'm married to him, I'll have access to everything. He has a good job, owns his house outright, has life insurance. The kids and I will finally be secure." Danny realized then that Sarah wasn't just lying about who she was. She was planning to use his father for his money. She was going to marry him under false pretenses, and then probably find a way to take everything he had worked for. That night, Danny made a decision. He couldn't let this happen to his father. He couldn't let this woman destroy their lives. But he also knew that simply telling his father might not be enough. His father was so in love that he might not believe Danny's accusations. He needed proof, solid evidence that would make the truth undeniable. Danny spent the next 2 days gathering evidence. He took photos of the contents of Sarah's purse with his phone. He wrote down the phone number for Carlos and the address he had found. He even managed to record part of one of Sarah's phone conversations on his phone. Now, as he stood at the back of the church holding the ring-bearer's pillow, Danny knew he had all the evidence he needed. The question was whether he had the courage to use it. In a few minutes, he would have to walk down that aisle, and when he did, he would either stay silent and let his father marry a woman who was deceiving him, or he would speak up and destroy what his father believed was his chance at happiness. The wedding march continued to play, and Sarah was halfway down the aisle now, her fake smile perfect for all the guests to see. Michael's face was glowing with joy, completely unaware that his bride was living a lie. Danny took a deep breath and made his choice. Danny's legs felt like lead as he began walking down the aisle. The wedding march played softly, and every eye in the church was on Sarah as she glided toward the altar in her pristine white dress. But Danny couldn't take his eyes off his father's face, seeing the pure joy and love radiating from Michael's expression. This was the happiest Danny had seen his father since before his mother died. As Danny reached the halfway point of the aisle, his steps began to slow. His heart was pounding, so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it over the organ music. The ring pillow in his hands felt impossibly heavy, weighted down by the burden of the truth he was carrying. He thought about his mother, Emma, and what she would want him to do. She had always taught him that honesty was the most important value, even when it was difficult. Sarah reached the altar and took her place next to Michael. The groom's face was radiant as he looked at his bride. Sarah smiled back at him, but Danny could see something in her eyes that the rest of the congregation couldn't see: fear, guilt, and something that looked almost like regret. Pastor Williams opened his Bible and cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Michael Thompson and Sarah Martinez in holy matrimony." Even hearing the fake name made Danny's stomach turn. As he approached the altar, he was supposed to hand the rings to the pastor and then take his seat in the front row. It was a simple task he had practiced several times during the rehearsal. But instead of walking to his designated spot, Danny stopped in the center of the aisle, just a few feet from where his father and Sarah stood. "Marriage is a sacred bond," Pastor Williams continued, "built on love, trust, and honesty between two people who have chosen to share their lives together." The word honesty seemed to echo in Danny's ears. He looked at Sarah, who was staring straight ahead, seemingly focused on the ceremony. But Danny noticed her hands were trembling slightly, and there was a thin layer of perspiration on her forehead, despite the cool temperature in the church. "Danny," Michael whispered, noticing his son hadn't moved to his seat. "The rings." But Danny didn't move. Instead, he looked out at the congregation, seeing the expectant faces of his relatives and family friends. His Aunt Claire was in the front row, watching him with concern. She seemed to sense that something was wrong. Pastor Williams paused, waiting for Danny to take his seat so the ceremony could continue. The silence in the church grew uncomfortable as everyone realized something was happening that wasn't part of the planned ceremony. "Danny?" Michael said again, his voice containing a note of confusion and growing concern. Sarah finally looked at Danny, and their eyes met. In that moment, Danny saw something flash across her face: recognition of the truth he carried and fear of what he might do with it. She knew that he knew. Danny could see it in her expression as clearly as if she had spoken the words out loud. "Dad," Danny said, his voice small but carrying clearly in the quiet church. "I need to tell you something." Michael's smile faltered slightly. "Son, can it wait until after the ceremony? We're in the middle of—" "No, Dad, it can't wait." Danny's voice grew stronger with each word. "It's about Sarah." A murmur went through the congregation. This was clearly not part of the wedding ceremony anyone had expected. Sarah's face went pale and she grabbed Michael's arm. "Michael, maybe we should just continue with the ceremony," she said quickly, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The boy is probably just nervous. We can talk about whatever is bothering him later." But Danny had found his courage now. He thought about the photos he had seen of Sarah with her real children, the husband who was wondering where his wife had gone, and the elaborate lies that had been built around his father's trusting heart. "Her name isn't Sarah Martinez," Danny announced, his voice now carrying clearly to every corner of the church. "Her real name is Maria Santos, and she's already married." The church erupted in gasps and whispers. Michael's face went from confusion to shock to disbelief in a matter of seconds. "Danny, what are you talking about? That can't be true." Sarah's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. "He's lying," she said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction. "He's just a child who doesn't want his father to remarry." Kids say all sorts of things when they're upset. But Danny wasn't finished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Dad, I found 2 phones in her purse. She has a husband named Carlos and 2 kids in Arizona. She left them 9 months ago, right before she met us. The church fell completely silent except for a few shocked gasps. Michael stood frozen, looking between his son and the woman he thought he was about to marry. "Show me," Michael said quietly, his voice barely audible. Danny approached the altar and handed his phone to his father. On the screen were the photos he had secretly taken of the contents of Sarah's purse, photos of Maria Santos with her real family, copies of her real identification, and screenshots of the text messages between her and Carlos. As Michael scrolled through the images, Sarah began to back away from the altar. "I can explain," she said, but her voice was shaking. "It's not what it looks like. You have children," Michael said, his voice hollow with shock and hurt. "You told me you'd never been married. You told me you worked at the hospital." He looked up at her with eyes that were filling with tears. "Who are you?" The truth was finally coming out, and Sarah knew there was no way to explain it away. The carefully constructed lies of the past 8 months were collapsing around her like a house of cards. "My real name is Maria Santos," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am married to Carlos, and we have 2 children together. But Michael, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Michael's voice was rising with anger and hurt. "That you lied about everything? That you made me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist?" Pastor Williams stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Perhaps we should take this conversation somewhere private." "No," Michael said firmly. "She made this deception public by agreeing to marry me in front of all our friends and family. If she wants to explain herself, she can do it here." The congregation watched in stunned silence as the wedding transformed into a confrontation. Some guests were pulling out their phones, unsure whether they should be documenting this moment or giving the family privacy. Sarah looked around the church at all the shocked faces staring at her. She saw Aunt Claire's expression of disgust, the confusion on the faces of Michael's co-workers, and the satisfaction in Danny's eyes at finally having the truth revealed. "I needed the money," Sarah said finally, her facade completely gone now. "Carlos lost his job and we were going to lose our house. I thought if I could find someone stable, someone who could help support my family." "So you decided to commit fraud?" Michael's voice was cold now. "You were going to marry me under a false identity to steal my money?" "It wasn't stealing," Sarah protested, though even she seemed to realize how weak her defense sounded. "I do care about you, Michael. These past months I've grown to care about you more than I expected. But my children need security, and Carlos can't provide it anymore." Danny felt a mix of vindication and sadness as he watched his father's world crumble. He had done the right thing by exposing Sarah's lies, but seeing his father's pain made him question whether the truth was always worth the hurt it caused. The church remained eerily quiet as Michael processed what he had just learned. His hands trembled as he held Danny's phone, scrolling through image after image that proved his entire relationship had been built on lies. The woman standing before him in a white wedding dress was a complete stranger, despite the 8 months they had spent building what he thought was a life together. 8 months, Michael said slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "For 8 months you pretended to be someone else. You sat at my dinner table, you played with my son, you slept in my bed, and you lied about every single thing." Sarah's carefully applied makeup was starting to run as tears formed in her eyes. "Michael, please. I know how this looks, but I never meant for it to go this far. At first I just thought I could get some money to help my family, but then I got to know you and Danny and I started to care about you both." "Care about us?" Michael's voice was rising with anger. "You used us. You made me believe that I had found love again after my wife died. You made my son believe he was getting a new mother. How is any of that caring?" Danny watched his father's face transform from hurt to fury, and he began to worry that maybe he should have handled this differently. Perhaps he could have told his father privately instead of exposing everything in front of the entire wedding congregation. Aunt Claire stood up from her seat in the front row. Michael, maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere else. Everyone doesn't need to witness this. But Michael wasn't ready to leave. He had questions that needed answers, and after months of being lied to, he wanted the complete truth. Where do you really live? Michael demanded. And don't give me another lie. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. Phoenix, Arizona. I've been staying in a motel here in town since I met you. A motel for 8 months? Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. How did you pay for that? You told me you worked at the hospital, but Danny checked. There's no Sarah Martinez working there. I've been doing odd jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing at a diner outside of town. I told them my name was Sarah so no one would connect me to my real identity. The weight of the deception was staggering. Michael realized that not only had Sarah lied about her identity, but she had created an entirely false life just to manipulate him. Every conversation they had shared, every intimate moment, every plan they had made for the future, all of it had been part of an elaborate con game. What about your husband? Michael asked. Carlos, does he know where you are? Sarah shook her head. He thinks I left him and the kids. He's been trying to reach me for months, but I kept making excuses, telling him I needed time to think about our marriage. Danny stepped forward, still holding the ring bearer's pillow. Dad, I recorded one of her phone calls. She told Carlos that once she married you, she would have access to everything. Your money, your house, your life insurance. Michael looked at his 12-year-old son with a mixture of pride and sadness. You've been carrying this burden for weeks, haven't you? Danny nodded, tears now flowing down his cheeks. I wanted to tell you, Dad, but I knew it would hurt you. I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some other explanation. You did the right thing, son, Michael said, pulling Danny into a hug. This must have been so hard for you to handle alone. Pastor Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. Under the circumstances, I think it's clear that this ceremony cannot continue. Marriage is indeed built on trust and honesty, and those foundations are clearly absent here. Sarah looked around the church desperately, as if searching for someone who might support her or offer her a way out of this nightmare. But every face she saw reflected the same expressions of shock, disgust, and betrayal. Please, Michael, she pleaded one last time. I know I made mistakes, but I can explain everything. My children really do need help. Carlos has been out of work for over a year, and we were about to lose our house. I was desperate. So you decided to destroy my family to save yours? Michael's voice was cold and steady now. Did you ever think about what this would do to Danny? He's already lost his mother, and you were going to become part of his life based on lies. I grew to love Danny, Sarah insisted. That part wasn't fake. He's a wonderful boy, and I would have been a good stepmother to him. Based on lies, Michael repeated, his voice echoing in the church. Everything would have been based on lies. How could you possibly build a real relationship with a child when your entire identity was false? Danny looked up at his father. Dad, there's something else. I think she's been going through your financial papers. Last week when you were at work, I saw her looking through your desk in the home office. This revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. The desk in his home office contained all of his important financial documents, bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance policies, and his will. The thought that Sarah had been systematically gathering information about his assets made him feel sick. What were you planning? Michael asked Sarah. Were you going to rob me blind and then disappear back to your real family? Sarah's composure finally completely crumbled. I don't know, she sobbed. I don't know what I was planning. Everything got so complicated. At first, it was just supposed to be simple: meet someone with money, get what I needed to help my kids, and leave. But then I got to know you both and I started to feel guilty, but I was in too deep to tell the truth. The congregation began to murmur among themselves, some people starting to gather their things to leave. This was clearly not the wedding celebration they had expected to attend. Michael's brother Tom approached the altar. Michael, maybe we should call the police. What she did, using a false identity fraud, these are serious crimes. Sarah's eyes widened with panic. Please don't call the police. I have children. If I go to jail, what will happen to them? You should have thought about that before you decided to commit fraud, Aunt Claire said sharply. Those children have a father. Maybe it's time for him to step up and take responsibility while you face the consequences of your actions. Michael looked at Sarah one last time, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he loved with the stranger standing before him in a wedding dress bought with money she had probably stolen from other people she had deceived. I want you out of my house, Michael said quietly. I want you to pack whatever belongs to you and leave town. If I ever see you again, I will call the police. Sarah nodded through her tears, understanding that this was probably the most mercy she could expect under the circumstances. As the guests began to file out of the church, many stopping to offer Michael and Danny words of support, the magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. The wedding that was supposed to be a new beginning had instead become the revelation of an elaborate betrayal that could have destroyed their lives if Danny hadn't found the courage to speak up. The church slowly emptied as guests quietly made their way to the parking lot, whispering among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Some lingered to offer support to Michael and Danny, while others seemed eager to leave the uncomfortable situation behind. The beautiful wedding decorations now seemed almost mocking in their cheerful white and gold splendor. Michael stood at the altar in his wedding suit, still holding Danny's phone with all the evidence of Sarah's deception. He felt numb, as if he were watching someone else's life fall apart rather than living through his own nightmare. The woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with was gathering her wedding dress and preparing to leave, taking with her every dream and plan they had made together. Dad, are you okay? Danny asked, his voice small and worried. Despite having done the right thing, he was struggling with guilt over causing his father such pain. Michael looked down at his son and managed a weak smile. I will be, buddy. Thanks to you, I found out the truth before I made the biggest mistake of my life. Sarah approached them hesitantly, her wedding dress rustling as she walked. Her face was streaked with tears and ruined makeup, and she looked nothing like the confident, radiant bride who had walked down the aisle just 20 minutes earlier. Michael, before I go, I want you to know that not everything was a lie, she said quietly. My feelings for you became real. I know you'll never believe that now, but it's true. How can I believe anything you say? Michael replied, his voice tired rather than angry now. For 8 months you lied about your name, your job, your past, your family, everything. Even if some of your feelings were real, they were based on the life you were trying to steal from me. Sarah nodded, accepting that there was nothing she could say to make this situation better. What are you going to do about the house? All of my things are there. I'll pack them up and leave them on the porch, Michael said. You can pick them up tonight, but I don't want to see you. After that, I want you gone from this town. What about the police? Sarah asked fearfully. Michael looked at Danny, then back at Sarah. If you leave quietly and never contact us again, I won't press charges. But if I ever see you near my son or my home, I will call the police immediately. Sarah nodded gratefully. It was more mercy than she probably deserved, and she knew it. She looked at Danny one last time. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know you probably won't believe this either, but I did care about you. You're a brave, smart boy, and you did the right thing today. Danny didn't respond. He was still processing everything that had happened and trying to figure out how he felt about it all. As Sarah left the church, Michael's family began to gather around him and Danny. Aunt Claire was the first to reach them, pulling both father and son into a protective hug. I'm so proud of you, Danny, she whispered. That took incredible courage. Pastor Williams approached them with a concerned expression. Michael, I'm so sorry this happened. In 30 years of performing weddings, I've never seen anything like this. It's not your fault, Pastor, Michael replied. Thank you for stopping the ceremony when you did. Michael's brother Tom clapped him on the shoulder. What do you need us to do? Do you want us to go back to the house with you? Michael considered this. Going home to the house where Sarah had been living, where her belongings were scattered throughout the rooms they had shared, suddenly seemed overwhelming. Actually, yes, Michael said. I think I'd like some help packing up her things. And, Danny, maybe you should stay with Aunt Claire tonight while I deal with this. No, Dad, Danny said firmly. I want to help. We're a team, remember? We got through losing Mom together, and we'll get through this too. Michael felt a surge of pride at his son's maturity and strength. Okay, son, we'll do this together. The drive home was quiet, with Tom and Claire following behind them. As they pulled into the driveway, Michael noticed Sarah's car was already there. She was standing on the front porch, no longer in her wedding dress, but wearing jeans and a t-shirt with 2 suitcases beside her. I came to get my things, she said as they approached. I didn't want to wait until tonight. I thought it would be easier this way. Michael nodded and unlocked the front door. Take what belongs to you, and leave the key on the kitchen counter. As Sarah moved through the house collecting her belongings, Michael and Danny sat in the living room with Tom and Claire. The house felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of Sarah's deception. Every corner held memories of shared meals, conversations and quiet evenings that now felt hollow and false. Dad, Danny said quietly, I've been thinking about something. What if there are other people she's done this to? What if we're not the first family she's tried to trick? Michael hadn't considered this possibility, but Danny's observation made sense. Sarah's deception had been too elaborate, too well planned, to be a first attempt. She had known exactly how to present herself as the perfect partner for a widower with a young son. You might be right, Michael said. Maybe we should reconsider calling the police. If she's done this before, she might do it again to someone else, Tom agreed. People like this don't usually stop on their own. She'll just move to another town and find another victim. After about an hour, Sarah emerged from the house with several boxes and bags. She placed the house key on the porch railing and walked to her car without saying another word. As she drove away, Michael felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that she was gone and couldn't hurt them anymore, but sadness for the future he had imagined with her. Over the next few days, Michael and Danny worked together to remove all traces of Sarah's presence from their home. They donated the wedding decorations to a local charity, returned the wedding gifts to the guests who had brought them, and tried to restore their house to the way it had been before Sarah entered their lives. During this process, Michael discovered more evidence of Sarah's deceptions. Hidden in her dresser drawer, he found credit card applications filled out in his name that she had never submitted. In her purse, which she had forgotten in her haste to leave, he found business cards from several law firms that specialized in divorce and asset division. She was planning to marry you and then divorce you, Claire observed when Michael showed her what he had found. She would have taken half of everything you own. The realization of how close he had come to losing everything made Michael feel sick. If Danny hadn't found the courage to speak up, he could have lost his house, his savings, and possibly even custody rights to his son. A week after the wedding that never happened, Michael made the decision to contact the police. He realized that Danny was right. There might be other victims, and Sarah needed to be stopped before she could hurt anyone else. Detective Rodriguez listened to their story with growing amazement. Mr. Thompson, you and your son may have uncovered a much larger criminal operation. We've been investigating several cases of identity fraud in neighboring states that match this pattern. Women using fake identities to target widowers and divorced men with assets. So there are others? Danny asked. We believe so. With your evidence and testimony, we might be able to connect Sarah Santos to several other cases. This could help us protect other families from going through what you experienced. As they left the police station, Michael put his arm around Danny's shoulders. You know, son, you probably saved more than just our family. You might have saved other families too. Danny looked up at his father. Do you think you'll ever want to get married again? Michael considered the question seriously. Maybe someday, but next time, I'll be much more careful. And I'll make sure to listen if you have concerns about someone. I just want you to be happy, Dad. But I want you to be safe too. Michael smiled at his son, marveling at the wisdom and courage Danny had shown throughout this ordeal. I am happy, Danny. I have you, and that's enough for now. We make a pretty good team, don't we? The best team, Danny agreed. As they drove home, both father and son felt a sense of closure beginning to form. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also shown them how strong their bond was and how much they could depend on each other. The experience had been painful, but it had ultimately made them stronger. 6 months later, Michael and Danny had settled into a new routine that felt both familiar and different from their life before Sarah. The house no longer held the shadow of her deception, and they had created new memories to replace the false ones she had helped them build. Detective Rodriguez had kept them updated on the investigation into Sarah's activities. As they had suspected, she was part of a larger network of people who specialized in targeting vulnerable single parents. The evidence Danny had gathered had been crucial in connecting her to at least 4 other cases across 3 states. Sarah, whose real name was Maria Santos, had been arrested in Phoenix when she returned home to her family. Her husband, Carlos, had no idea what she was doing. Detective Rodriguez explained during one of his updates. He thought she had left him and the children because she was unhappy with their marriage. When we contacted him, he was shocked to learn about her criminal activities. The detective had also shared that Sarah's children were now in counseling to help them understand why their mother had disappeared for almost a year. Carlos was working with social services to provide them with the support they needed while also dealing with the legal consequences of his wife's actions. What will happen to her? Danny had asked during their last meeting with the detective. She's facing charges in multiple states for fraud, identity theft, and attempted extortion. She'll likely spend several years in prison, Rodriguez had replied. But because she cooperated with our investigation and helped us understand how this network operates, she might be able to serve a reduced sentence. For Danny, knowing that Sarah was facing consequences for her actions had helped him process the guilt he sometimes felt about exposing her. He had struggled with the idea that he had broken up someone else's family, even though he knew he had done the right thing. Michael had enrolled them both in counseling to help them work through the emotional aftermath of the betrayal. Dr. Sarah Chen, their therapist, had helped them understand that being deceived by someone they trusted was a form of trauma that needed to be addressed properly. Trust is something that's built over time, Dr. Chen had explained to them. What happened with Sarah doesn't mean you can never trust anyone again, but it does mean you've learned to be more careful about who you let into your lives. The therapy sessions had also helped Danny understand that the burden of keeping Sarah's secret for weeks had been too much for a 12-year-old to carry alone. He learned strategies for communicating with his father about difficult topics and gained confidence in his ability to speak up when something felt wrong. For Michael, the experience had been a harsh lesson in the importance of taking relationships slowly and really getting to know someone before making major commitments. He had realized that in his eagerness to find companionship and create a complete family for Danny, he had ignored several red flags that should have made him more cautious. One evening in early fall, as they were making dinner together, Danny brought up a topic that had been on his mind. "Dad, do you ever miss having someone else around? I mean, not Sarah specifically, but just having another adult in the house?" Michael paused in his vegetable chopping. "Sometimes I do miss the idea of having a partner to share things with, but I've learned that it's better to be alone than to be with someone who isn't honest with you. And besides, I'm not really alone. I have you. But I'm going to grow up eventually and move out," Danny pointed out with the practical wisdom that continued to amaze his father. "That's true," Michael admitted. "And when that happens, maybe I'll be ready to think about dating again. But this time I'll be much more careful. And I'll definitely get your opinion before I get too serious." "About anyone?" Danny grinned. "I promise to do better detective work next time." "You did pretty amazing detective work this time," Michael said, ruffling his son's hair. "I just hope next time you won't have to carry such a heavy secret by yourself." Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Michael opened the door to find his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a covered casserole dish. "I hope I'm not interrupting your dinner," she said with a warm smile. "I made too much tuna casserole, and I know how much Danny loves it." Mrs. Patterson was a widow in her 60s who had lived next door for over 10 years. She had been one of the few people who had expressed reservations about Sarah, though she had kept her concerns to herself at the time. "Thank you, Mrs. P," Danny said, taking the casserole dish. "Dad and I were just talking about trust and relationships and stuff." Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. "Those are important topics. You know, after what you both went through, I think a lot of people in the neighborhood have been more careful about who they trust, too. Sometimes it takes a wake-up call to remind us to pay attention to our instincts. After she left, Michael and Danny sat down to eat the casserole along with the salad they had been preparing. "You know what I learned from all of this?" Danny said, thoughtfully. "I learned that sometimes adults can make mistakes too, and that's okay as long as they learn from them." "That's very wise," Michael replied. "I also learned that I have an incredibly brave and smart son who will always have my back. And I learned that I can trust you to listen to me, even when what I have to say is hard to hear." Over dinner, they talked about their plans for the upcoming weekend. They had tickets to a baseball game, and Danny's friend Jake was going to join them. It was the kind of simple, normal family activity that they both cherished more now than they had before. Later that evening, as Michael was tucking Danny into bed, his son asked one final question. "Dad, do you think we'll ever hear from Sarah again?" "I don't think so," Michael replied. "And even if we did, she can't hurt us anymore. We know who she really is, and we know how strong we are together." "Good," Danny said, settling under his covers. "I like it being just us for now." As Michael turned off the light and closed Danny's bedroom door, he reflected on how much they had both grown over the past year. The experience with Sarah had been painful and traumatic, but it had also strengthened their relationship and taught them valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the importance of listening to their instincts. He walked to the living room and sat in his favorite chair, looking around at their home. It felt peaceful now, free from the tension and deception that had filled it during Sarah's time with them. For the first time in months, Michael felt genuinely optimistic about the future. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Detective Rodriguez with a final update. "I wanted to let you know that the case has been officially closed," he said. "Sarah Santos has been sentenced to 3 years in prison, and the network she was part of has been completely dismantled. Your testimony and Danny's evidence were crucial in making that happen." After hanging up, Michael felt a sense of closure that he hadn't expected. The legal system had worked, justice had been served, and other families were safer because of Danny's courage to speak up. As he prepared for bed, Michael thought about his son's question about whether he would ever want to remarry. The answer was maybe, someday. But he knew that any future relationship would be built on a foundation of complete honesty, genuine compatibility, and the kind of trust that could only be earned over time. Most importantly, he knew that he and Danny could handle whatever challenges life brought their way. They had proven that their bond was strong enough to survive deception, betrayal, and the collapse of dreams they had thought were real. Together, they were ready for whatever came next.